As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So Israeli TV reported on Monday that the Israeli War Cabinet convened again and agreed to respond to the Iranian attack clearly and forcefully, but there are no details on what the response would look like. The report said that the War Cabinet agreed that the attack must send the message that Israel will not allow an attack of that magnitude against it to pass without a reaction. So there's a few ways that Israel could respond to this thing. They could go back to, their old ways of more covert attacks. They have intelligence assets, inside Iran. They carry out a lot of covert attacks there, like assassinations, sabotage attacks, small drone attacks. And there's also the possibility that they target Iran in Syria again, or if they just, target some of Iran's allies in the region, like Hezbollah or some of the Shia militias that operate in Syria. I guess that's a potential response. If they really want to hit Iranian territory, that would be the big escalation here. And could they really do that without support from the U.S.? I'm not sure. So we'll see what comes of this. I keep seeing that there's lots of conflicting reports. Some say that an Israeli response is imminent. Some say that they're going to take their time. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen here, and only time will tell what the Israelis do next. And another question is, if Israel does do kind of one of those covert attacks or bombs more Iranians in Syria, Iran is saying that if Israel strikes them again, that they'll launch an attack even bigger. So would they launch an attack even bigger in response to, something more covert? I'm not sure. The White House said on Monday that it opposes the idea of a bill that would give additional military aid to Israel without funding Ukraine and Taiwan. So White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said, quote, "We are opposed to a standalone bill that would just work on Israel. As we've seen proposed, we would oppose a standalone bill," end quote. So this came after House Speaker Mike Johnson said on Sunday that he was going to work on getting Israel more aid in the wake of this Iranian attack. But then later in the day on Monday, Johnson said that he's going to bring all of it, the Israel aid, the Ukraine aid, the Taiwan aid, to the floor for a vote, but they're going to be voted on separately, is what he said. And so this isn't good. I mean, if they're brought to the floor for a vote, each one, I think, would pass no problem through the House. And this is essentially the $95 billion foreign military aid bill that includes $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Taiwan. And then there's a few billion, about $4.8 billion that, what did I say? $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel. And then there's about $4.8 billion for Taiwan and other spending in that region. That wouldn't all go to Taiwan, but so he's saying that they're going to hold votes on them separately. And again, I'm sure that they're all going to pass. And as far as I know, his plan would give each country the same amount of money that's included in this $95 billion monstrosity. So it looks like, they're finally going to get, I mean, again, if this is brought to the floor in the House for a vote, it'll pass, and then they'll probably have to vote on it again in the Senate, and I'm sure they'll pass it right through, and then that means all the aid, all the weapons money will be flowing again. So Ukrainian officials have expressed envy over the U.S.'s response to an Iranian drone and missile attack on Israel. The U.S., the U.K., France, and Jordan all intervened to help intercept Iranian drones and missiles. I've seen these reports that the Saudis might have been involved, but as far as I've seen, that has not been confirmed. So that's not really clear. And then you have the Jordanians. They're saying, oh, we just, shot down drones that violated our airspace. They didn't say that they defended Israel, but still people in Jordan aren't happy about that. The Palestinians that have been protesting at the Israeli embassy in Amman aren't happy about it. So Zelensky sees this and he said, quote, "The whole world saw that Israel was not alone in this defense. The threat in the sky was also being eliminated by its allies," end quote. The attack on Israel came as Russia has stepped up its missile and drone attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which Moscow said was a response to Ukrainian attacks on oil refineries inside Russian territory. Ukraine has suffered serious blows in the strikes as it's running low on air defenses, and Russia's intelligence continues to improve. So Zelensky said, quote, "When Ukraine says that its allies should not turn a blind eye to Russian missiles and drones, it means action is needed, a bold one. It is not rhetoric that protects the sky. It is not opinions that curb the production of missiles and drones for terror," end quote. So the U.S. and NATO have not directly intervened to intercept missiles and drones, obviously because it risks, it risks direct war with Russia, which could quickly turn nuclear. Everybody knows why they're not directly intervening. And if you remember, in the early days of the war, Zelensky was asking Congress, he was asking the U.S. to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which would involve NATO shooting down Russian planes, having to bomb Russian missile systems inside Russia. So Zelensky was asking for World War III at first. There were not many takers in Washington. There were a few nutcases who supported that idea, but Zelensky eventually stopped asking for the no-fly zone. So Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba acknowledged that the U.S. and NATO would not directly intervene, but called for more military aid. He said, quote, "Even if you cannot act the way you act in Israel, give us what we need and we will do the rest of the job," end quote. And then I just mentioned how, Ukraine still hasn't gotten the aid, and we've seen all these, still hasn't gotten that $60 billion that Biden is looking for. So there's not getting too much aid from the U.S., although they have found some places to pull money from. And just the dire situation on the battlefield, the Ukrainian lines are collapsing, manpower shortages, just all these things. And despite all this, the U.S. wants this thing to keep going, wants to keep fueling this horrific war.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
Again, commodity prices jump. Yeah, for two reasons. They're looking at a rebound, but you know what else they're doing? More sanctions. And it's driving up the prices of aluminum and other metals. These sanctions are moronic. We wrote about them in the beginning. They're doing it again. Yeah, they hurt Russia's GDP in 2022 when they put sanctions on it. But last year, Russia's GDP went up 2.25%. So they're still selling their products. These sanctions are only hurting we the people, driving up the price of everything. We got idiots and morons, demonic people in charge. End of story. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. Yeah, I suck shit. I eat crap food. Democracy around the world, one clown after another telling us what to do. Again, home affordability falls to its lowest in 40 years. What does it mean? Where's the real estate market going? We're giving you the ups and downs. And again, what nobody's talking about, nobody, anywhere, in any depth at all, and if they only mention it, it's just passing by, is the coming banks are going to go bust. It's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to get worse. It's going to be the worst financial crisis in human history when these banks start crashing. By the way, Scott Ritter, look up his stuff. There's nobody that I know of that knows more about the real insides of the military, the function of it, how it's, this guy really knows his stuff. He was on the other side. He's been all over the world. And I was listening to one of his podcasts. It was on George Galloway. Matter of fact, I'll be on tomorrow with him, Galloway. And he goes on to explain what Iran did. He said, yeah, they sent in these drones and they knocked them out. Then they sent in more missiles and then they sent in more sophisticated things that struck what they wanted to strike. And Iran didn't strike any place that was going to kill people, which they could have. But it cost, and this is coming out of the mouth, he said it cost Israel, the United States, and others who fly these weapons a lot of money. It didn't cost Iran a lot to shoot this stuff in. And coming from the Israeli data, it cost $1.3 billion to shoot down those missiles. What no one is talking about, we're going to do a special report on it. Israel's economy is going down the toilet. Yeah. Can you imagine being in your home and all of a sudden, you're hearing that Iran is sending in these drones? Oh, you're going to go out and have a good time right after that, huh? Oh, this has been going on now. October, November, December, January, February, March, April. Yeah. But don't worry, when all else fails, they take you to war. The war's going to keep ramping up. So by John and Nisha Whitehead, Tyranny by the Numbers. The government wants your money any way it can get it. America, Amerika, will steal from you. Trends in technocracy, again, trends in cryptos. Duran does a whole great article on that. As Trends I Views. Democracy, billionaires own the country. So let's look at the 2024 presidential election. This is the United States that slaughters people all over the world under the bullshit line. We're fighting them for freedom and democracy. In order to run for any office in America, you got to have money behind you. And the people that buy the politicians off, they call it campaign contributions. And they pay them back. It's no democracy. You got no dough, you don't run for office. It's a crime syndicate in charge. As forecast, COVID-19 lockdowns kill the human spirit as alcohol use surged. Yep. We said it would happen. It happened. Oh, remember this bullshit coming out of the political mouths? Close down your business. Go back in your house. You can't go to work, but the liquor stores could stay open. You know why they kept the liquor stores open? Because the scumbag politicians and the bureaucrats, they need taxpayer money. And the taxes on alcohol, state and federal, are ridiculous. That's why they kept them open. The danger of this COVID war is incalculable. Life has changed dramatically. Where I am up in Kingston, I was just talking to two people. I don't want to mention who they are, and how business is what it used to be before COVID and how empty the place is now. It's everywhere. You go to Woodstock, it's 15 minutes from 8:30 at night, it's dead. Roads, nobody on them. Office vacancy rates, office occupancy rates, mental illness, kids going back, not going back to school. This COVID war destroyed, and again, we go into this, what it did to China and where China's economy is going and what they're going to be doing to bring it back. So that's just some of what you're getting, and you're getting a lot more. And you better prepare for what's going on over here, because we are in a very, very serious situation. This economy, again, nobody's talking about in the major media about the office vacancy rates, the office occupancy rates, the businesses that have gone out of businesses, there are less commuters, and how there's going to be a banking crisis. That's just on one end. And why gold prices keep staying high. Again, we're the only ones in the world. And if you could show me anybody else that said 2024 would be a golden year for gold, let me know. So think about it. If you bought the Trends Journal for $2.50 a week and invested in gold when we said it was going to fly high, think of the money you would have made.
Live from Run Your Mouth World Headquarters, it's today's Run Your Mouth.
And now we've got Speaker Mike Johnson, who is saying that, he's going to separate all the different wars that we're going to try and fund and figure out new ways that he can try and sneak this into some sort of a bill. I don't know, maybe there's some sort of a Save the Kittens, rehire Fauci, COVID prevention fund. He's like, I got 3 wars I need to fund, and everyone's upset with me, and I'm not sure what to sneak this into. But as Israel escalates us towards World War III, we're going to need that money. Hey, guys, you can give me the money the easy way or the hard way. You can either just approve it into one of these bills, or Israel can keep provoking Iran into a war, but we're going to be fighting Russia one way or another. So what's it going to be, punk? You want to just give us over the money, send it over to the Pentagon? Can we just maybe bribe whoever these overlords are? Just what's the amount of money that they need that we could just not have the wars? Can they maybe just come forward and go, listen, for the last 100 years, we've been provoking wars and we've been killing all sorts of civilians and we've been making sure that this, that, and the next thing was happening. Here's the amount of money that we need. When does someone just show up like Dr. Evil and just give us the number? Just give us the number that if we made sure that you had that amount of money, you'd have everything you need. You wouldn't even need to print the bullets. You could get out of the war game and we wouldn't have to have all this death. And so I was talking about how boring eclipses are, which they are, but it's fun to watch? The greatest fireworks show of all time. The greatest fireworks show of all time, where 2 countries don't go to war, but pretend like they're going to war. They play a massive game of freeze tag. Somebody attacks someone while they're on base. Then they go, you're it. Well, we got to respond. They call up the United States government. They go, listen, we're going to have to do something over here. Can you tell us what we can do? And they go, you can send over a lot of your drones and make a nice fireworks show. And we can spend 4 hours pretending like you might do horrible damage to the whole country. And then we can get an opportunity for our pilots to get up there and do a drill. And we can see how well our equipment works. And at the same time, Russia can test our equipment to see how it works. And then they can spend more money on gear and we can spend more money on gear. And I think that'll be a win-win for everybody. And then Iran goes, okay, cool. So if we coordinate with you on exactly how this attack should be done and we do it, are we still okay to pretend like we're mortal enemies after the fact? And America goes, yeah, we're good with that if you're good with that. And so we got war theater here, people. I had people calling me up on Sunday. I had some friends actually went out to Israel and they're like trying to escape the country. They said they felt like it was the last boat off an island. It was like when Vietnam collapsed. They're like, are we going to be able to even get out of this airport? And like other friends, they're all alarmed and they're going, hey, oh my God, have you seen this? World War III is about to pop off. And so here you have the very expensive fireworks show that Iran sent over to Israel. And here's why I was telling my friends, don't worry, at least this round is war theater, coordinated war theater. Is it stupid? Might it escalate? Of course. But this round, coordinated war theater. So first I was seeing articles from Biden saying he expects, this is from NBC News, Biden, he expects Iranian strike on Israel sooner than later. And what I learned from the Russia war is if the Biden administration tells you enough time that they actually think something's going to happen, it seems like the incident does happen. But then I saw articles talking, this is from Reuters, where it seemed like there was conversations with Iran coordinating what the attack might be. So this is from Reuters. Iran aims to contain fallout in Israel response, will not be hasty, sources say. Hey, listen, if we're going to go strike these guys back, we're not going to be hasty with it. We're not going to do something that might actually damage them. We're not going to try and catch them from surprise. well, we're going to strike them back, but, we'll do it in a reasonable way. And once again, these are the people who are building nuclear bombs that want to wipe Israel off the month, and they fund the terrorism in the region. You can't possibly get along with these people. But when it comes to getting them back after you hit their general who was on base and you violated international laws, well, they're not going to be hasty. They're not an unreasonable country. Sure, you've got mortal enemies on the axis of evil, and sometimes they'll act unreasonably when they respond to things that you did where you attacked them first. But Iran's not going to do that in this case. Let's continue reading. Dubai, Washington, April 11th. Iran has signaled to Washington that it will respond to Israel's attack on Syrian embassy in a way that aims to avoid major escalation and will not act hastily as Tehran presses demands, including a Gaza truce, Iranian sources said. Listen, we're trying to be in a fight here, but not a real fight. Iran's message to Washington was conveyed by Iranian Foreign Minister Hussein blah, 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 during a visit Sunday at the Gulf Arab state of Oman, which has often acted as an intermediary between something and something. This is further in the Reuters article. A White House spokesperson declined to comment on any messages from Iran, but said the United States has communicated to Iran that it was not involved in the strike on the embassy. So apparently we do have communications with these people. I just envision some big table where they go, hey, here's what's acceptable. All right, fine, we'll go do that. And we're just watching the coordinated war theater. It's like a play where I guess you could just not send the drones, and then we cannot spend the $2 billion shooting down your drones. Or you can give them the specific instructions of what won't cause any damage, and then both sides could go, all right, look at us, we're both playing our parts in the war theater. Iran's foreign ministry was not immediately available to comment. The Omani government did not immediately respond to emailed questions for comments sent during the Muslim Eid. I don't know what the fuck that is. A source familiar with U.S. intelligence was not aware of the message conveyed via Oman, but said Iran has been very clear that its response to the attack on its Damascus embassy compound would be controlled and non-escalatory. Sounds pretty much like coordinated war theater, doesn't it? We're making it clear we're going to re-attack you, but not in a way that does anything or escalates this, but it will be an attack. And so what ended up happening, this is from the New York Times, Iran's missile attack on Israel has ended for now, and virtually none of the missiles reached their targets. And then here was Netanyahu's response. Netanyahu, Israel Prime Minister, wrote on social media, we intercepted, we blocked, together we will win. Doesn't it almost sound like a post-game press conference? Netanyahu's out there like, our team, we had a pretty good idea of what they were going to do. And so we knew kind of in advance what they were going to throw at us. And luckily, our defense, they ran good coverage. And with the support of the United States, nothing happened here. And then here was other people, because I was over here. I'm like, am I just a conspiracy theorist saying that this is coordinated war theater? And I think this was from the Wall Street Journal. Attacks on Israel largely performative, says former senior U.S. officials. Here's the quote from the article. Singh, who is now at the Washington Institute, said the attack showcased Iran's reluctance for direct confrontation with Israel and highlighted Israel's close military cooperation with Arab and international partners. Sounds like they all sat down at a big table and said, here's what you're allowed to do. And they sent it over, and they went ahead and they did it.
I'm talking with Patrick McFarlane from the Institute here. Elaborate, if you could, about the situation there in Kinmen Island, and then what you say about the special forces being deployed there. I guess you could imagine that's a message to the Chinese that, boy, we really are serious. Or the other explanation is, like you say, it's a deliberate provocation, but it sounds like a provocation either way.
It is a curious kind of situation there with, the history of the Chinese Civil War and the Kuomintang, the nationalists fleeing to Taiwan with some kind of losing the Civil War, but still after that being supported by the United States. And you have this little enclave right off the coast of people who, they're right in the path on the doorstep of China, but they're still part of, these are people who are identified as Taiwanese people. And so they have been attacked by the mainland, back in decades ago. And is it a heavily militarized island already? Yeah, in a sense. I mean, there's like defense. There's the hedgehogs on the beaches, and there's bunkers and things like that. I don't know exactly how heavily militarized. I believe that there's Taiwanese soldiers that are there. The great Ron Paul, what he always talks about is putting the shoe on the other foot. And I think it's really like if China put soldiers on Alcatraz or something. It's not a well. Alcatraz, I mean, Catalina Island is 22 miles off the coast of California. Here we're talking, like Alcatraz, right there in the bay. Right. Exactly. It's unbelievable. Yeah. To think, whatever quirky situation where you still have Taiwanese forces based there, that's one thing. But putting American special forces on the ground there? Yeah, it's insane. You mentioned Gareth Porter and the war in Vietnam. I mean, it's directly the same kind of thing that got us involved in Vietnam is the deployment of these military advisors. Now, to be fair, I think the number is around 10 or less than 10, something. So it's not a huge detachment, but it's still a large provocation. I mean, just the geography and the history in that location there, it's insane. And, I read this thing in the Asia Times where they were talking about the Chinese at least claim, and I don't know why to disbelieve them, that they've got the automated machine tools to just crank out cruise missiles.
that they can just produce these things by the thousands and thousands.
Do you know, Scott, if what's this whole deal with the hypersonic missiles? I actually don't know if is the
Well,
United
the Russians
States,
have been using them in Ukraine.
okay, but is the United States capable of producing them, and do we have some?
No, the Americans have not figured it out.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
That's what they say. And I think believably, or else they'd be boasting.
Yeah.
So I think from what I've read, the ones that the Russians are using are going Mach 5, which is not Mach 9 or 10 as Putin claimed in his speeches, but still pretty fast. And what's the point? It just reduces warning time, reduces decision-making time. And of course, as we've seen, you can put a conventional warhead on them. So somebody in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean shoots a hypersonic missile at you, Mr. President. It may or may not have an H-bomb on it. What do? Launch on warning, and with 5 minutes to decide instead of 20.
Exactly.
Smoke them if you got them. All right. And now finally, would you get back to India a minute there? You mentioned how America is bringing them in to help hem in the Chinese, which is interesting because they sure are closer and closer economic partners with America's rival Russia right now. But I guess they're putting that aside. They have their use here, but there have been clashes in the Himalayas in just the past couple of years. And I think one of them, some officer, I think I got this right, ordered the men to drop their rifles, and they just went out there and had a giant fist fight, like infantry in the mountains. But that could turn thermonuclear right there, too. Or, yeah, I don't know if India has H-bombs, but China sure does.
Kind of reminds me of like the gangs of New York. I don't know. It just seems so absurd to be true, but truth is stranger than fiction, but whatever. Yeah, it's a really interesting situation. The former head of NATO, James, I believe his name is James Stavridis, he wrote a fiction book about war between the U.S. and China. And I did an article about that a couple years ago. Maybe we talked about it on your show, Scott. But the big question mark was, in that conflict, what role does India play? And I think in the last few years, we've kind of had more of an answer because that was kind of the linchpin of the whole book is that India intervened kind of as a neutral third party. But it seems that the United States has been working on turning them not neutral. Of course, there are these conflicts between India and China, but it kind of had its impetus most recently in 2020 when, there was a melee that ensued up there. And it's all about this. It's a territorial dispute that China and India have overlapping claims to this territory. And, since then, we've been getting more on board with India, helping them in this dispute by giving them satellite data to track Chinese troop movements in the area. And it seems like, DeCamp again wrote up a piece saying that India definitely used that intelligence in a more recent clash in 2022. So, again, flipping India more to our side, trying to integrate their military with ours in the same way that we're doing with the Philippines and Australia and Japan.
Yeah. As you say in your piece here, deterrence works until it fails. And you have a war like we have in Ukraine right now. Only in this case, with both sides armed with nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles. So,
welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold.
The United States is the deterred party. Being deterred is a sign that you are the weaker party in any conflict. Because, of course, the stronger party typically is not deterred. Typically.
See, that's a bizarre argument, too. Because just because you're the strongest doesn't mean that you have to constantly be the aggressor or the escalating force in any conflict. You can also, from a position of strength, negotiate for peace, can you not? So, once again, I find this logic deeply flawed that the more powerful party has to be the one that continues to escalate things. That's not the case. In fact, you don't have to be that. I would like it if it weren't the case. And if it is the case that the strongest party must always escalate, then you're basically advocating on behalf of complete conquest and domination of the world just simply based off of military might, setting aside morality or principles or anything else.
Again, it is the weaker party who is worried that the cost of action will outweigh the perceived benefit. Typically, if you're on the playground, it is not the bully who is being deterred by the weakling, it's the weakling who's being deterred by the bully. When it comes to foreign policy, the United States has the world's largest and most powerful military presence, spanning the globe in terms of technology far more advanced than anything on the table, by a factor of probably 5. And yet it is the United States that is over and over being deterred by significantly smaller powers, which of course is why smaller powers are feeling their oats right now.
Now let's talk a little bit about that, because it seems as if the claim is that simply because we're the strongest, there's no reason that we wouldn't be escalating things aside from cowardice or having been deterred by the Iranians. I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, I think there's a much more valid claim to be made that we ought to be cautious in this moment simply because we are financially destitute. And also, there is a financial alliance led by Russia at this point, along with China in the BRICS, that is challenging the US dollar. And if you continue to spend into oblivion and you also continue to use the sanction regime to try and, basically force the rest of the world into accordance with our own, preferred geopolitical structure, well, then you might expedite the demise of the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world, in which case it is actually very much to the benefit of the American people not to escalate this into a hot world war. Setting aside the moral aspects of risking every man, woman, and child on Earth in nuclear hellfire, I think that there's plenty of reasons that we ought to be a little bit more cautious with these things. Don't you think?
So the question is why? Why exactly has it become sort of rote, point of course, for other smaller parties to deter the United States? The answer obviously is not insufficiency of American materiel. The answer obviously is not insufficiency of America's military might. America is so far beyond, for example, the Chinese military in terms of advancement, that the idea that China would go to full-scale war with the United States, that'd be the biggest mistake China ever made.
How are we still living in this dream world where nuclear powers can go to war with one another, and it would be the biggest mistake China ever made, but not also our biggest mistake ever? Like, does anybody like actually think about this rationally anymore? Like, can we win a conventional war against China or Russia or both? Well, maybe. I'm 100% not sure. However, just taking it on face value that yes, we can. Okay, well, it doesn't matter because they have nuclear weapons. So if this escalates out of control, it ultimately does. There is no winner. So you have to be more prudent. This big dicking of the planet is inevitably going to end in the destruction of the human species. And it just seems as if no one is actually telling the truth about how dangerous this paradigm is.
And even so much as funding our allies so those allies can defend themselves with forward action to deter, for example, Iran from doing this again. That would be some sort of American aggression. That would escalate things. The reality is that when it comes to the Middle East, every single conflict is a game of chicken. The game of chicken, as we all know, is a game wherein two sides both drive toward a cliff, and whoever stops closest to the cliff without driving over wins the game of chicken. The worst case scenario is you're the one who goes off the cliff. But when it comes to the United States versus other countries, we have both the best gas and the best brakes. The reality is that if there were to be a cliff, and if we were to hit that cliff, the significant impact would be on Iran and not on the United States.
Oh man, what a crazy metaphor, and what a crazy path to advocate for, with any level of seriousness. I mean, he is explicitly arguing in favor of a game of chicken because we'll win it. and even if we lose it, which is what he says, if we slam into that cliff, which I think it would mean you fall off of the cliff, that it will still be worse for Iran than it will for us. Okay, well, assuming that's the case, just take it on face value. Assuming it's worse for them, it would also be bad for us. And how is it a benefit to us? Is there any actual claim as to why this is in our interests? And he completely dismisses the concept that this can escalate into a wider war, particularly given that we are actively funding a proxy war against the largest nuclear power on planet Earth, aka Russia. And we're also consistently saber-rattling against the Chinese when it comes to Taiwan. So you can't envision a way in which getting ourselves bogged down in a war against Iran would ultimately be a net negative to the American people and, in fact, catastrophic to us? Perhaps Russia does move on Poland or some NATO territory. I don't think they will, but they see the U.S. military bogged down in Iran. What do they do then? I don't know. Does China move on Taiwan? I don't know. What if they do? Are we going to then try and have a three-front world war? Can you see the escalation? It's so obviously there. This is not like fear-mongering nonsense. These are 3 active bills that Mike Johnson is trying to pass this week that are all proxy wars. You can't see the escalatory trap here. It couldn't be more obvious to me, but apparently Shapiro only sees we are stronger, so we have the best gas, we have the best brakes, we'll stop before we hit the cliff, and even if we hit the cliff, which I don't know how you hit a cliff, you usually fall off, but setting that aside, it'll be worse for the Iranians than it will for us. Well, you know what that means is that it's also bad for us, because if it's worse for them, worse implies that it's still bad for us. So how is it good? Where's the upside?
Oh, there's going to be a situation, if you can actually put this up, where he is going to have to, Speaker Johnson, is going to have to go to the floor and probably rely on Democrats. And this is from the Politico write-up of what's going to happen this week. He says, if even a handful of conservatives oppose the rule vote, then Johnson would need Democratic support to move forward. And it's incredibly rare for the minority party to assist on those rules votes. I underline that. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries declined to comment on whether he expected his caucus would support the package. We're not going to come to any conclusion about the process till we understand the substance. That means, and some people have even been saying on Twitter, it's actually Speaker Jeffries, not Speaker Johnson, because he holds all the power in his hands right now.
Yeah, I think it is, and they're holding the cards.
Yeah, and you had rules about the rules votes back then.
Yeah, it's tricky, and I'd be more discretionary under the concurrent situation, because my basic rule was, if I'm elected as a Republican, which means the margin might be libertarians and others that help, but still there was probably an automatic vote. I got 30 or 40% if you run in a Republican district. The Republicans will vote for you or the Democrat. So I felt some loyalty there, but not ever to give up on any of the issues. But when things controversial came up and the rule came up, it was very rarely, when I think back when a bill like going to war or something was so atrocious that it didn't even deserve to have a debate. My general rule was, debate it and have a vote up or down, and not try to close them out in the rules, because a lot of shenanigans go on in the rules. And it was a surprise to me when I got to Washington that you might have a bill that's gone through a committee and spent a lot of time developing the bill, and then they send the bill, to the Rules Committee, and they can rewrite the whole thing if they want, and it's a new bill. That to me just seems weird. And the other thing that I've warned about is where they do it is in a conference.
Yeah.
The House has a bill, the Senate has a bill, and say, oh, okay, just split the difference. And very often there's a lot packed into the conference too. So the debates so often, and all this noise you hear, sometimes just superficial and just for the public's digestion.
Remember the strike all after the title and insert this text. That's what they would do.
Yeah, that happened.
But I remember, because it was rare, and I don't remember the exact bills, but it was rare that you voted against the rule, against your own party for a rule. Because it was when you were so disgusted by the process that you really wanted to make a point. So the fact that Johnson is going to be relying on the Democrats to get this through, I think it shows he's lost confidence of the Republicans in the House. He's lost the ability to lead them. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the implications of this. But it's going to be a busy week and a bad week for people who care about America, I think.
But as chaotic as the situation is, and we're talking about the Republicans' chaos, I mean, the Democrats have chaos too. And
Yeah.
I think the chaos and the failure of accomplishing anything and protecting our freedoms and balancing the budget, it's bipartisan, because when you think of the fighting going on between the progressives and the anti-war, the warmongering Democrats.
Yeah, the neocon Democrats.
Now the neocons are as powerful in the House as is in the Senate. In the Democrat side as it is in the Republican side.
Yeah.
So that's a representation of how messy it is. So the chaos is bipartisan, and I keep thinking, well, there's about 6 of them get together and have their real strategy planned. This is what we're doing, but in the meantime, this is what we'll do.
Massey decided he'd had enough. He's sick of it. And we always follow what Massey does, and we're grateful for his thoughtfulness on the Hill. If we can only clone a few more Masseys. So he has had enough. Put this next one up. Here's Massey. He tweets out a little bit ago, I just told Mike Johnson in conference that I'm co-sponsoring the motion to vacate that was introduced by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. He should pre-announce his resignation, as Boehner did, so we can pick a new speaker without ever being without a GOP speaker. So very dramatic move. Politico picked it up. Put that next one on. Politico picked it up and said, second Republican says a back effort to oust Johnson from speakership. And I highlighted the subtitle. It means the speaker would almost certainly need Democratic votes to retain his gavel if his rivals move against him. That would mean he is a speaker for the Democrats as well as the Republicans. And here's Massey's bill of particulars, Dr. Paul. Here's what he's talking about if we go to the next one. Speaker Johnson has led the GOP to pass 1, an omnibus that spends more than Pelosi's highest year. 2, an expansion of the domestic warrantless surveillance program. And this week he's pushing 3, Schumer's Dream Bill, which contains $100 billion of foreign aid, mostly for war. So I think he's pretty justified in that. He's mad.
Overly justified. It shouldn't have existed, but that's what they're up against. And I just think that we're looking at this thing going on for a while. And it'll be interesting, though, to see how they may have the transition, what they're going to do. I don't think they'll be sensible enough for Johnson to resign. You know? But this literally means the Democrat not only votes to get rid of somebody they don't like, but it looks like it'll be pretty blunt that they're really voting Republican, and the Republicans are ducking out, but standing up for maybe the Constitution or some other principle. So it'll, and this week might be a pretty big week on all of this.
And I can't imagine if I'm a Dem out there and I have the opportunity to save Speaker Johnson, I'm not going to get my pound of flesh. You know, they're going to want concessions, you know, through the roof.
Yeah.
Think about it, because you know, in exchange for supporting Speaker McCarthy, Massey got that great concession. We need to have a majority on the Rules Committee, and that's been very powerful. People don't understand how powerful the Rules Committee is. So nobody can tell me the Dems are not stupid. They're going to make they're going to demand some serious concessions.